When my son was 8 years old, he honestly was not a very athletic kid. And I got some advice from a coordination coach that completely changed how I looked at raising up a youth baseball player, where he told me that there were 3 periods during childhood that could dramatically affect a kid's athleticism, strength, and power. And once a kid passes through those, making up for lost time becomes a lot harder. But what's cool is I got that advice about 10 years ago, and that awkward little 8-year-old eventually became a kid hitting balls out of Little League fields when he turned 11, and opposite field home runs in high school as a sophomore, and eventually a player ranking in the top 1% of kids nationally for how hard he can hit a baseball, which earned him a college scholarship to go on and play at the next level. And after applying the same ideas to his younger siblings and seeing the same results, I learned some things that made this process of how to build up a good ball player work even better. So in this video, let me show you the 3 windows of opportunity I would pay attention to if I were starting over today, which I kind of am, because I do have an 8-year-old. The first window I think most parents miss has nothing to do with mechanics, and it has everything to do with teaching kids how to go into attack mode versus defensive mode. Youth baseball accidentally rewards the exact behaviors that we don't want kids learning if we want them to keep going in the game. So coaches will always be like, hey, just make contact. So they'll hit a little weak ground ball, and then the shortstop will boot it, and the first baseman can't catch it, and they make it all the way around and score, and now they're completely pumped in psych. And look, I'm not saying like getting on base is bad, but I've seen kids celebrate those things exactly the same way that they'd celebrate absolutely smoking a baseball. And that's been a battle that I've had to fight with all of my kids, like my youngest here, where when he would get in the box as an 8-year-old, first year kid pitch, there was no like attack mode. You can see it in his body language. There's no forward move. There's no rhythm. There's nothing. He was basically just waiting to see the pitch first and then reacting, hoping, I hope it doesn't hit me, or I'm only going to swing if it's right there. And that mentality has never, in the history of ever, produced a good hitter. Because hitters don't defend, they attack. So here's how I help my kids think about this the right way. I tell them hitting is like a fight. If one guy throws the first punch while the other guy's just still standing there waiting to like see where the punch is going to go before he does anything, that second guy's going to lose a lot of the time. We have to attack before they attack. So the question is, how do you teach an 8-year-old to do that? And what has helped my kids understand this is realizing that hitting isn't just a swing. It's timing up their bodies with another person. So parents will send me videos all the time where they're all like zoomed in on their kid, and all you can see is the image of just their kid and maybe some chain link fence because they're really bad at filming. But they're like, what's wrong with my kid's swing? Why can't he hit? And they're trying to figure it out. But I can't see the picture. I'm missing like half of the equation that's required of a dance, and hitters are the same way. So we started teaching him something that I call stride timing, where instead of waiting until the pitch is released before he's doing anything, we started to teach him to start to be in rhythm with the pitcher. And on a slower pitcher, which is where he's just started to figure this out, what we tell him to do is start picking up your foot right when that pitcher's foot lands. This is an example of what it looked like before, where he's obviously not doing that, and you could tell he's like not ready to get into this fight. And then here he is just starting to pick up his foot. As you can see, the pitcher is just getting his foot into the ground. And the cool part about this is this puts his body in a position to actually do damage. And that's the part that I think a lot of people don't miss. I want everything to be rewarding for the results that are going to scale instead of the results that are just going to win in today's game. So most kids just get excited about the little dinky ground ball that everybody misses and they get a home run. But I try to get my kids addicted to that feeling of, I just smoked one to the outfield. And we actually have a rule in my house that the only way you get ice cream after a game is if you hit the ball to the outfield grass. Because I don't want my kids becoming addicted to weak contact and just surviving up there. I want them addicted to attacking and like juicing balls. Because once kids start chasing that feeling, everything starts to change. And once I've taught my kids how to turn this light switch on, that's when we start to open up the second window of opportunity, where we're building rotational athleticism. This starts to happen in that like 9 to 11U range, where everybody thinks hitting starts here and you got to start teaching mechanics, knob to the ball, elbow up, stay through it, keep your head down, whatever cue people are teaching this year, this new style or whatever. And look, if all you care about is winning some 8, 9U games, you can absolutely survive doing that. You can hit a bunch of weak ground balls. They'll find some holes. Kids will boot them. You can put balls in play. You'll win some games. Your kid will have some fun. It'll be a great time. But here's the problem. I'm not trying to build the best 8-year-old hitter. I'm trying to build the best hitter at 18, because eventually that bigger field shows up. that better pitching shows up. The stronger athletes start to learn how to pitch, and weak contact stops working really, really quickly, especially after the age of 12. So if we're trying to build that player, the player that's going to go on and play in high school, we got to look at what the big boys are doing, because one thing you notice at the high levels is these guys are moving in a different way than you see guys moving at the low level. So watch Mookie Betts right here. Right as his front foot is landing, you are seeing his hands are still going up and back. You'll see these guys' pelvises opening. You'll see the torso stretching right before they rotate. And what they're doing, whether they realize it or not, is they are loading elastic tissues in the body. Things like their fascia that runs across their core, which acts like a giant rubber band running through the body. And when you learn how to stretch it, and it's in a bunch of different areas of the body, when you learn how to stretch it right before it fires, it gives you like this snapping, extra reflexive, extra explosive force that most kids are just not even tapping into at all. Which is why, if you've ever looked at a smaller hitter, like my 12U daughter, for example, who's smallest girl on her team and can start to hit home runs, even though she didn't have the muscles, everybody thinks, oh, they're so strong, they'll have so much power. Like, if you learn how to use the elastic systems of your body, you can generate that power too. That's why there's small guys in the big leagues that can still hit 30 jacks a year. They're not relying on their muscles. They're using a different system. And when you learn how to identify these in the hands and the pelvis and the wrists and the torso, the shoulders, the hips, the body becomes like this giant spring that will work with it, with all the different parts, like in a really good way. And that's the thing most people miss, because it does not come naturally. Which is why you can take somebody like an NBA player. I've seen this happen at like celebrity softball games. They're like the best athletes in the world, or, you know, it's arguable, but they're really good, right? But you hand them a bat, and sometimes they look like a little T-baller up there, because regular athleticism, like running and sprinting and jumping, and rotational athleticism are not the same thing. And I think this is where everybody misses the boat, because none of this works if the body can't control those positions that we need to have them in to be good rotational athletes. So we all think, oh, this is what big leaguers do. Let's teach the kid how to do this. But if the kid can't control the movements required to actually master those positions, you could tell the kid, keep their hands back, open up your hips, try to get separation. And maybe the kid can sort of fake it in practice. But then when the game speeds up, you wonder, like, oh, why does that movement disappear? And the reason it disappears is because they don't have the stability in those movements that we're trying to teach them to actually be able to, like, use those moves in a game where you don't know where the ball's going every time, and you don't know the speed that it's going to go, and actually make contact. So they default to a stable position, which is not usually a very good position if you haven't trained them how to have control yet. That does help them hit the ball, but it comes at the sacrifice of actually moving like an elite rotational athlete. Which is why when we see bad mechanics, we don't try to give you a drill to fix the mechanics. Instead, we look at the foundation, motor control. And this is where all of our work with what we do starts. Because before I care whether your kid can rotate explosively, I want to know, can they control their pelvis? Can they stabilize on one leg? Can they rotate without losing posture and standing up and rolling over balls? Can they control their torso? Can they maintain positions while moving fast? Because if they cannot, the body starts to make compensations. And it's like when you watch, like I just did, an 8U, 9U Little League game, and you watch all the kids run out into the field, and you think to yourself, or at least I did, oh my gosh, like all these kids are like atrocious moving athletes. And then there's like that one kid, and he's like, oh, that kid gets it. He's athletic. But a lot of people don't stop to think about like why that is, right? So they'll look at one athlete, you're stiff, you just don't move your arms right, or this is all disconnected, or, you know, whatever. The kid doesn't run right. One kid's arm does wings out and the other's stable. Did you ever stop to think about why that is? Because I think those are broken movement systems, broken motor control systems going on in that kid's body that simply have to be addressed, or you are not going to solve this problem of developing a high-level hitter that's going to have a good shot at being a good high school varsity athlete or beyond. And one example of where we see this like absolutely the most that not enough people are talking about is pelvic control, where we have some pelvic control screens. And when we run athletes through them, literally almost everybody fails them. And we find that a bad pelvis and lack of control in the pelvis is a huge contributing factor to like a lot of the swing problems that a lot of kids have. So my daughter is not immune to this either. So when she was 11, she actually failed one of these pelvic control screens that we ran on her. But instead of trying to chase swing cues or getting her to another hitting lesson where they could try to fix this, we started to attack that movement problem by putting her into pelvic control exercises. And 8 weeks later, as one of the smallest girls on her team, she started hitting balls out of the park because we weren't fixing the swing. We were fixing the movements that were causing the swing to to be bad. This is why when everybody else spends their time up here at the top of the skills pyramid, we spend most of our time down here. Because when you fix the movements, everything above the movements gets way easier to train. Which is why we regularly take undersized kids and help them to develop elite power, or big uncoordinated kids and help them start to look smooth and athletic. And it's important to realize that if you skip this step and you wait until after puberty hits to start to attack these things, you never get the window of opportunity back to learn those movements as easy as it is before puberty. So if you've got a pre-puberty kid, you got to do this stuff. If you're after puberty, yes, you can still learn it, but it's a lot like learning a foreign language. You will be able to learn it effortlessly with zero accent if you learn it at, 3, 4, 5 years of age, like you can't tell that the person came from another country. But if you're like a 50-year-old in another country trying to learn a new language, like it's almost always going to have an accent, and it's almost always going to take like 10 times more effort to learn. Motor control works the same way. There's a lot of research about it, and you do not want to miss this window. Which kind of segues into the third window of opportunity, where kids need to learn perfect lifting form before puberty as well. And honestly, I can't take credit for discovering this. I got this one from listening to Kyle Bodie, the founder at Driveline, on some random podcast years ago, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he said something I'll never forget. He said, if I wanted to give my son like a 2 or 3 year head start in college so he'd really do good, I would start teaching him perfect lifting form around 8, 9, 10 years old. And when I heard that, it immediately clicked for me, because most parents wait until puberty shows up and then suddenly decide, okay, now let's get serious about strength training. But that's backwards, because once puberty hits, there's this surge of testosterone that floods through the body unlike anything they're ever going to get legally in their lifetime. And when you're in that window, you don't want to waste 1 second of all of that flood of hormones that can promote bigger, stronger, faster muscles and tissues. So how do I squat? How do I hinge? Do I clean well? Do I move well in all of the movements? You want to get all of those things handled before puberty, so that the second puberty hits, you can start to stack a ton of weight on the bar, and you could do so safely because you've got good form in all the lifts. And so another kid who starts lifting at the same time as you, or starts to stack weight on the same time as you will be able to stack more weight because you have good form. And so the testosterone will help you grow more muscle than the kid who doesn't have good form, so he can't handle as much weight, so he can't put as much weight on the bar, so he can't give his body enough stimulus, and he cannot grow as fast as you who've already helped your kid do that. So after hearing this, around 10 years old, I got my son working with an Olympic lifting coach. Not because I cared about how much weight he lifted. You don't care before puberty. I couldn't have cared less. What you care about is movement quality. You want them to do perfect squats. You want perfect deadlifts and hinging patterns and perfect cleans and reverse lunges and all that stuff. You want them owning those major lifting patterns. It's like learning that language. So that when puberty started to show up, for my son, he's a little bit later, 14, he wasn't learning movements anymore. He already owned those movements. And at that time, when we started, he was 166 pounds. And because of us getting in this foundation, we started stacking that weight on the bar aggressively. And 6 months later, he turned into the kid that looks like this. He's 187 pounds here. This is 6 months later. And around that same time, balls started doing things they had never done before. So his freshman summer, he started hitting balls almost 400 feet, something most kids around him weren't even coming remotely close to, right? Not because he suddenly became more talented, but because we hadn't skipped any of the windows and we hit the developments all at the right times, and the power started to come here with this extra testosterone surge. It was like a hockey stick. Just a ton of progressive, explosive growth just started to show up instantly. Where other kids were still learning the movement because they were taught keep the nod to the ball too much instead of focus on being explosive, and they were never able to achieve the same amount of power that my son was able to achieve. So now he's a senior in high school. He's around 217 pounds. He's got a college scholarship to go play next year. And will there be guys there that are stronger and more developed than him? I'm sure that's going to be the case. But at least we've set him up in a way where he's able to have a great high school career, and he's going to get a chance to go play in college because we didn't have him behind the 8 ball physically. So look, if you're wanting to help your son or daughter become as explosive as possible, those are the 3 windows of development opportunity that I see parents miss all the time. And the frustrating thing is a lot of them don't realize they are missing them until their kids start falling behind later and it's too late. But here's the good news. You don't have to figure all this out today, because if I were starting over with an 8-year-old tomorrow, the very first thing I would do is not change their swing. It isn't buy weighted bats. It isn't buy another lesson package. I'd figure out whether they have movement foundations to actually support elite rotational athleticism. And if they didn't, those are the things that I would spend my time doing on. And if you'd like to learn how to get started on that journey, click the video right here because I'm going to walk you through the very first movement screen that we always run our hitters through, even if they're 8, 9, 10 years old, or even if they're 18, that identify the 3 biggest motor control problems most kids are missing, and it'll show you how to start fixing them.